All right, here tonight we want to celebrate the Black History Month event. Even though we're doing it in March, it's still very much significant. So I would like to go with, provide a little bit of background just for you to have a segue to the panel discussion we're going to have tonight by our guest. Black History Month is a time to learn more about Canadian histories and many other important contributions that Black Canadians and their communities have made to the over 400 years history of Canada. Black History Month was started nearly a century ago in 1926 as Negro History Week because of the courageous action of Carter Woodson, a historian whom many regard as the father of Black history. Woodson wanted to challenge the racist attitudes and ideas people had about Black people, as well as educate and encourage others to learn about the achievements of Black people. Woodson picked February because it's the birthday of two influential leaders who played a significant role in ending slavery in the United States, and that would be Frederick Douglass and Abraham Lincoln. In 1976, Negro History Week was renamed as Black History Month, where history is a Greek word meaning to know. In essence, Black History Month connotes a time Africans tell their stories from their lens of lived experiences and remember people who went before them to pave the way for the future. In 1995, House of Commons officially recognized Black History Month, February as Black History Month in Canada, following a motion introduced by the first African Canadian woman elected to Parliament, the Honorable Jane Augustine. In 2008, Senator Donald Oliver, the first Black man appointed to the Senate, introduced the motion to recognize contributions of Black Canadians and February as Black History Month. So I'm gonna, can you help me please? Okay. So I'm going to bring up a couple of examples of Black heroes that we have. We have Marianne Shard Carey. She was an activist, educator, publisher, journalist, and the first Black woman to publish a newspaper called the Provincial Freeman in North America. As an educator, Shard Carey established a racially integrated school for Black children in Windsor, Ontario, and as an activist, she advocated for the rights of Black people and women. Eleanor Collins, I would like to highlight her as well. She is Vancouver's first lady of jazz. I love jazz music, by the way. She was the first Canadian woman to have her own national television show, and she championed the values of equality and acceptance, and is considered a civic leader and pioneer in the development of British Columbia's music industry. And in the military sphere, I would like to highlight Lincoln Alexander. He was an Air Force veteran, a lawyer, a politician. He was the first Black member of Parliament and the first Black federal cabinet minister. In 1985, he was appointed as Canada's lieutenant governor, becoming the first visible minority to hold this position. As lieutenant governor, Alexander's mandate focused on youth and education, and as a result of his contributions to Canadian politics, he was appointed to the Order of Canada at the rank of companion. As noted in Canada's defense policy, the Canadian Armed Forces is striving for more diversity to end hateful conduct within the ranks and to eliminate systemic racism. This means rallying support across the organization, which had not always been the case before now. These conversations for change are ongoing and gaining maximum support across all levels of leadership. In the same vein, the military is making some progress in recruiting more visible minorities to advance diversity and representation. Recent statistics show that about 9.2% of service members were visible minorities in January 2022, up from 7.4% 3 years earlier. The actual target is to push the needle up to 11.8% of those in uniform, representing females and indigenous people. Celebrating Black History Month tells employees, like myself, that organizations care about them and want to honor their identities. It's also a time for reflection and renewed action, and to see how organizations and leaders are measuring up against their DEI initiatives. Why? And I say it's because empowered people should empower people. Okay, so here tonight, we have real examples of today's heroes and outstanding Africans who are making noteworthy strides in their various endeavors, and they are willing to share their lived experiences with us. I have the singular privilege and honor to introduce our four guests. We have Commander Paul Smith, the first Black commanding officer of HMCS York. Thank you. He was born in Leonardtown, Jamaica, and grew up in New York, Ontario. In July 1986, Commander Smith enrolled in the Naval Reserve as a Naval Combat Information Operator at HMCS York. After completing his basic military qualification the following summer, Commander Smith conducted training in several reserve vessels before being posted to the mine-sweeping auxiliary vessel HMCS Anticosti in 1993. After attaining the rank of Petty Officer Second Class, Commander Smith obtained his commission to the rank of Sub-Lieutenant. In July 2014, Commander Smith took command of HMCS Kingston, and in so doing became the Black ship captain in RCN history. While in command of Kingston, he participated in the search for the lost Franklin expedition ship HMS Erebus and Terror in Canada's Arctic. In 2015, he transferred to command of HMCS Summerside, where he conducted exercises in the Mediterranean with the standing NATO Mine Countermeasures Group, counter-drug patrol in the Caribbean Sea as part of the OP Caribbean, and served as Task Force Commander for OP Projection, West Africa, in support of the Royal Canadian Navy's first deployment to the Gulf of Guinea region in over 10 years. Post-command positions included Senior Staff Officer Analytics and Readiness as Naval Force Readiness and Senior Staff Officer Europe, Africa, and Middle East at the Maritime Component Commander Staff. Commander Smith was later appointed Commandant of Naval Fleet School Atlantic before returning to Toronto to command HMCS York. Commander Smith is blessed with an incredibly supportive wife and two amazing sons. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in giving a warm welcome to Commander Smith, all the way from Toronto, Canada. You're welcome, sir. All right, also here with us is Patrick Etukudo, a mechanical engineer with a master's degree in supply chain management. He is presently the General Manager of Operations Services at Sherit International, with accountability for supply chain management, project management, loss prevention, health, safety and security, sustainability and operational excellence. Patrick is also a leader of corporate transformation in governance, structural design, mergers and acquisition, implementing enterprise systems and developing and enhancing talent. Previously held senior level corporate roles at Enbridge Inc., Suncor Energy, Petro-Canada and Royal Dutch Shell. He is also an active community leader and currently the president of the Nigerian Canadian Association of Calgary, and serves as a public member on the Council of Physicians and Surgeons of Alberta. He has served as director on the board of Supply Chain Canada Alberta and on the Program Council of Bow Valley College. He is currently on the board of the Calgary Catholic Immigration Society and also sits on the program committee of Southern Alberta Institute of Technology, SAIT. Patrick was awarded Fellow of Supply Chain Canada in 2018 and Premier Supply Chain Executive of the Year in Alberta in 2017. He resides in Calgary and is married with 3 children. Everyone, please join me in giving a warm welcome to an elder statesman and my big brother, Patrick Etukudo. Welcome, sir. Thank you. We have with us Claude Vigran, a Haitian-born Canadian raised in Quebec City, Quebec. He studied business management at the University of Moncton, New Brunswick. He played in 89 NHL games with the Vancouver Canucks, New Jersey Devils, and Philadelphia Flyers, and participated in the 1988 Calgary Olympics. Claude has played for 7 years in pro leagues in Germany and Switzerland, and won 2 Sprengler Cup with Team Canada in Davos, Switzerland in 1995 and 1996. Currently, he is a distributor for Jambet, a playground manufacturer, and does hockey skills development, including coaching for 14 seasons at various levels from under 15 to junior level. He is presently with the AMP Academy as a head coach and also involved in different charities with NHPLA, including the Hockey Alberta Diversity Group. He resides in Calgary and is married with 2 children. Please join me as we welcome Claude. You're welcome, sir. Thank you. And now I introduce to you the moderator for today's panel discussion. Moji Taiwo spent over 31 years of service with Alberta Justice and Solicitor General, Young Offender Branch, working tirelessly to improve and impact and positively shape the lives of young people and their families. Moji is a celebrated author of I Give Because I'm Blessed Because I Give, a chronicle of an immigrant's journey available on Amazon worldwide in hard copy, as you can see on the display table over there, ebook and audio downloads. In her book, readers will find excitement to be their unique self, inspiration to succeed by turning challenges to opportunities, motivation to pursue their dreams and achieve their goals, strength to challenge the standard norms, and audacity to be positively different. She is a recipient of many community leadership and professional awards, including but not limited to Governor General's Correction Exemplary Service Bar Award 2015, the Solicitor General and Public Security Leadership Award 2009, the Corrections Exemplary Service Medal Award 2008, and many, many more Volunteer Services Award. In 2017, I'm keeping myself to time. In 2017, her story was featured as one of Canada's 150 immigrant success stories by the Canadian Race Relations Foundation. Most recently, in 2018, she received the 25th year anniversary of NCAC Volunteer Award and was chosen for the cover story of Lethbridge College alumni magazine, The Wider Horizon. Moji is an avid volunteer for causes that improves the lives of youth, women, and families through various board memberships at different higher institutions and community organizations, including the Calgary Police Service Multicultural Unit, where she joyfully shares her professional expertise and knowledge as a successful immigrant who is a proud Canadian. She is also the host of the Immigrant Experience Show, a show that provides a platform to discuss matters of importance to the immigrant's individual and family. She is a wife, a mother, and a grandmother of 3 beautiful boys. Please join me as we welcome a trailblazer and a phenomenal woman. You're most welcome, ma'am. And please take it away. So I will invite the panelists to please have a seat.
It's better. Thank you all so much for coming this evening. It is our pleasure, if I can say that, to be here with you to share in the Black History Month celebration and the way we see things. February, or the month of February, it's not the only month to celebrate Black history. Black history should be celebrated every day of the month and every month of the year because we are all human and we contribute immensely. And every human deserves to be celebrated every single day of the year. So, on that note, I would like to say that it is my honor and pleasure to be joined on stage by these, wonderful men and privileged, the only woman. But I don't shy away from that because my own history, professional history in Canada, I've always been mostly the only woman and the only Black woman in places that I wasn't supposed to be, but I forged my way to be there anyway, because it's their problem, not mine. So this evening, we are going to be having a candid discussion amongst us here, and you will be listening along. But while you're listening, I ask you to please write a question or two down for us. Any question that you've been wanting to ask, whether it's race related, as far as our experiences and how we climb the ladder of success, or anything else that you feel that we may be able to impact your knowledge or your lives. Put a few questions down for us. You can submit your questions and it can be read out, or you can feel free and come on up during question and answer period and ask away. And we'll be very happy to answer your questions to the best of our abilities. Thank you. So, welcome, my fellow panelists. We have a few questions, and it's going to be threefold, but we are all going to get involved in the conversation. And it's more or less going to be a dialogue kind of thing instead of a question and answer up here. The questions will come from you guys, and we will try not to use up all of your time because you are the reason we are here. So your questions means more than what we have to say before you ask your questions. So in essence, we want to spend less time chatting, but more time answering your questions. Is that all right? All right. So before we go, you got a little bit of history, but I want to take us a bit back in time. So the history of Black people in Canada. In 1608, Matthew da Costa reported to be the first African to arrive in Canada. So Africans have been in Canada as documented way back, as far back as 1608. And in 1628, Olivier Lejeune reported as first known African slave to arrive in Canada. He was only 8 years old. So that will go into our discussion, but throughout our discussion, I will inject a little bit of history and legacy of Black people in Canada as we go along. But I don't want to listen my own self talk too much, so let's go. The first question to segue into our discussion is, what does Black history really mean to us here as a collective and individually? Who wants to go first?
Sure, I'll start. So what does Black History Month mean? For me, it's a time to both educate and get educated. So it's an opportunity to focus on our particular culture, and for me to learn as much as I can. So I'm a bit ashamed to say that there's a lot of things coming through this institution that weren't passed on to me. There's a lot of things growing up in Toronto that weren't taught at school about Black history. There still isn't as much as should be taught. But when I was growing up in the sort of late 70s, early 80s, we knew about stories within our own community, but we never really got into the history and the importance of Black achievement in Canada. So for me, once a month, or once a year, it's a month where we can talk about it openly. We can start having more and more conversations. But personally, it's a time to learn. So a few years ago, when we did the first op projection to West Africa, I didn't know much about the effect of the Jamaican Maroons in Nova Scotia, for example. Growing up in Toronto, even though I spent a lot of time in Nova Scotia and related to and learned about the communities over there, I didn't know enough about the history.
Well, that's interesting because even I can just imagine you growing up in Toronto, Ontario at that time, when as a Black child you were trying to just survive, let alone celebrating who you are.
Right.
Can you tell us a little bit about?
It kind of had to do with the communities that I grew up in. So. I spent a lot of time away from Toronto, a lot of time in Halifax, and despite Halifax having a significant Black population with its own history, it was sort of one history. So when I came back to Toronto, it's when I recognized how diverse that city really is. I never recognized that growing up as a kid. And to your point about growing up and understanding as an immigrant coming in, there's always a sense to fit in. There's always a sense to try to normalize. And within the community, Eglinton West, Little Jamaica, for those 4 or 5 blocks, I could see people that looked like me. I could talk about the culture. But then when I went to school, when I went to play, when I went to trips, it was all about trying to integrate into what at the time was seen as sort of the Canadian society. So there was a bit of a struggle. Trying to seek out anything beyond stories told by individuals in the community to try to drill down into the bigger part of history was extremely difficult back then. That was also a time when we didn't have the internet. You couldn't just Google everything that you were looking for. And so you had to rely on talking to an elder in the community to say, I'd like to learn about this. And then trying to track down the maybe one book that was in the public library on African history. So, devoid of any sort of that, I found that I spent a few years really not digging as deep into African history as I should have. So I take the opportunity now, once a month, and make sure. There's usually a theme in my house with my boys every February. What do we want to talk about now? What do you want to learn now? I've been fortunate for the opportunities I've had in uniform that my missions have allowed me to discover a lot of different things. Yeah, that's what I do once a year.
Claude, it looks like you're ready to get right into that discussion. You grew up in Montreal. Quebec City. Okay.
Now, basically, everything you said.
So what was your escape? Hockey?
Yeah, well, first of all, for me, Black History Month is a celebration of pioneers and achievement of good, achievement of good people like you here. Your background speaks for themselves. And it's a chance to have a voice, I think. In my case, hockey obviously was something I grew up doing. I come from a little island. My parents didn't know nothing about hockey. To me, I just learned the game. I was 8 years old, just by luck like this. And I remember going, those days we didn't have an indoor rink. I would go to my first hockey game, and I showed up with hockey pants, mittens, no helmet. And somebody told my parents, poor Caribbean people, they just moved to Canada. They said, well, it needs shin pads and elbow pads and things like that. So I went back home, and my mom found 2 Sears catalogs, and she put that as a shin pad for myself, taped them.
Wow.
But that's the thing. We're trying to make that sport more inclusive. Black History Month is a chance for the new generation of kids to see people that look like them. My idol was Guy Lafleur, French Canadian star with a mullet, long flowing hair.
Me too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I wanted to be like him. I want to have my hair to flow back, and if for some reason a stupid thing gets going up until I moved to Calgary national team, and the movie Coming to America came up with Eddie Murphy and Soul Glow. I said I was in a theater. I said that's what I want. I want to look like that, and I want to look like Guy Lafleur. So I found a place. I got my Jerry curl flowing in the back, and my trainer had to change my helmet about 2 or 3 times because it's too greasy. And but that just tells you something. There, I had nobody to look up to, And then it took until I played in Switzerland at Spangler Cup. We had a young player that came and played with us for that tournament, and he came from college, and he kept following me around. And finally, he said, "Hey, you're my idol," he said. And he said that me and the boys at college, every time you played in New Jersey, we would go by one of the dorms, sit around the TV, have a couple of pops, and then finally there's somebody like us that played hockey. And that's when the first time I realized that, somebody was looking up to me. And even Jerome McGinley, who's a friend now, that's how he started playing hockey, So So a month like this month, you know, I had a tough time in my career, ups and downs, but if you look at my hockey DB, or the stats, a lot of people would have done anything to have a third of what I did.
I have to say that it must have taken enormous courage for you to just step in there, even though there was nobody that looked like you at the time, but you knew what you wanted, and you wanted to be like Gila Floor. And you know, you went for it, even after you got to Calgary, and then you got your Jerry Curl and everything, you know, because that's another thing that most people don't realize, that we are so unique in a way that even our hair needed special care. And the population didn't know about it and didn't take time to know about it. And you as a young person had to find your way to even get your hair to your
And I look good. I look good too.
You look good too, I bet.
Face off like that.
So, Patrick, you didn't grow up here. So what does Black History Month mean to you?
So, first of all, thank you for having us. I loved that first part of the show. Loved the beautiful dresses and the beautiful women too. Diversity.
Diversity.
So I kind of feel like an imposter sometimes because I don't have the lived experiences of people like yourself. I arrived in Canada already, my career was already plotted. I'd worked all over the world. Canada is the 8th country that I'm working in. And so I'd conquered my fear of living in a foreign land. And I came to Canada already qualified. I had my first degree, I had my second degree. I had a profession. I felt I knew what I was coming to do in Canada. But I did have my shocks as well. And so we landed in 2004 in Toronto, Ontario. So next time I come, I will stop by. But for 3 years, I couldn't get a job. It didn't matter that I'm convinced not many people had the kind of qualifications and skills that I had. And to be able to pay for the house that I bought, to be able to feed the family, send the kids to school. By the way, my wife couldn't get a job because she's a journalist. And if you're in that profession, you need your connections. And because we were new in the country, she had no connections. So she couldn't practice. So there was no way I was going to leave my job. And what ended up happening then was traveling abroad, working abroad, coming home for breaks, getting back out. No surprise then that I couldn't get my citizenship in 5 years because I did not have enough days in Canada to be able to get my citizenship. I did get it eventually, right? But I feel I don't have the kind of lived experiences that Black kids growing up in Canada have. But I do have a son, and I know his experiences. I know when he's flagged down by cops. I know when they chase after him because they wonder why a 19-year-old boy would drive an Audi. You know, I know these experiences. I live in the community, I lead the community, and so I get the 2 a.m. calls from a mother who's looking for help to get her kid out of trouble. So I know these experiences, but I can never be like those who live them. And so that's my experience. And so what does the Black History Month represent for me? You know, when Annie was presenting, she talked about the fact that history means to know. And for me, it is how we change the narrative. It's not every Black kid that walks down the corridor that is a danger to the rest of us. It's not every Black kid that wears his pants at his knee that means harm to anybody. Some of them are pretty smart and quite qualified. And you'll be surprised at what they can do and the contributions they can make. And so for me, February is that time that we try to paint what reality looks like. And for many people, you see that once a year, but for the rest of us, we live it 12 months a year.
And that's why I said Black history should be celebrated every single day of the year. I'm going to join this conversation because I have my experiences of what Black history means for me is in between Patrick and the other two gentlemen, because I came here not as self-assured as Patrick or established, but not as young as Claude and Paul. So again, here I go, a 19-year-old plus somebody, single girl from Nigeria traveling to Canada alone. So for me, I wasn't young, but I wasn't old. But I was old enough to experience what Patrick said about a young Black boy being followed, because I was followed because I was young. And at the same time, going to school, like Patrick's wife, who was a journalist, I actually studied broadcasting here. So I went to school here, I studied broadcasting here, but I lasted at a radio station a whole 1 week after 2 years of studying. Why? Because of my accent. Why? Because in that radio station in Lethbridge, Alberta, CJOC, they've never seen a Black person before. And they weren't willing to take a chance. They weren't willing to give me the opportunity they were giving to my classmates. So that was my experience, which forced me to go back to university and totally change my course. But here I am today. I have, come full circle. So that was my experience, and so it's important for me, even way back in those days, and that will be 1978, 1979 in Alberta, that we must tell our own stories, because the narrative, the history that was told was wrong. We must tell our own stories, and that's what Black History Month means to me. And I have 3 children here. My son happened to be a very tall, lanky boy, and he was followed around by police when he was with his friends. Even though he had not done anything, the friends will be doing things wrong, and the worst thing a mother can do or a father can do is when your teenage son is leaving home with his Caucasian friends, and you pull your son aside and saying, don't do anything stupid out there. Don't do anything that your friend is doing. And my son will say, so what's the purpose of going out with my friends if I can't do what they're doing? I said, because the police will be watching you, not them.
Yeah.
So that's what Black history. So I have committed myself to educating, to telling our stories the way it is, not the way it's been told before.
And just to emphasize the importance of history and the importance of educating people on history, if I could tell a quick story. So,
Yeah, sure.
So we did a deployment to Western Africa, the first one, and the second stop was in Freetown, Sierra Leone. So a little known story is that Sierra Leone was founded by Nova Scotians. So there's a group called the Nova Scotian Settlers, made up of freed slaves from the American Revolutionary War, and people that were already living in Nova Scotia, and Jamaican Maroons. They worked the lands for a while, but because of everything from the weather to how they were treated in society, they had wanted to find their own lands. There was a company, I can't remember the name of the company in England, who had tried to settle Sierra Leone before, and it failed. So they sent, I believe it was 13 or 14 ships to Nova Scotia to take that group to Sierra Leone. They make the trip across the Atlantic, getting really sick. Some people died en route. They landed in Freetown, and if you've ever been there, the city is sort of up on a hill, and right at the top of the hill was a tree, it's a cotton tree, and that's where they prayed when they arrived. That's where they had their first meal. Thank God for a great arrival, that they could form their own lands. That tree is still there today. And when we were there, they were celebrating their 135th anniversary, and there's a plaque on there thanking Nova Scotia for the founding of Freetown, Sierra Leone. A pretty powerful story, well known in Sierra Leone, not known at all in Nova Scotia. So prior to leaving, I reached out to the provincial government to say, hey, is there anything that we can present? Is there a plaque that we can give? Is there a certificate that we can give, to share the common history that I feel we both have? And everything was turned down. There wasn't a lot of press, there wasn't a lot of knowledge, and again, on this side of the Atlantic, nobody knew the story. We showed up in Sierra Leone, met with the Canadian High Commissioner, because it was an event that evening, and I relayed the story to her. And I said, I think we need to promote this. It's Canada 150, it's there 135, like it's great. Sorry, wasn't there 135, it was there 300 and something. But she was unwilling to relay the story, because there was a feeling that it's not well enough known, and it's not going to gain Canada any traction on the international stage. So I explained that, we've been here before. We were there during the Ebola crisis. We were there during the Civil War. Canadians and Canadian military have been in Sierra Leone for quite a while. She still said it's a bit much. And I totally understand that was the political view of it. We show up to the event on board my ship that night, and they've got the transport minister, they've got their chief of defense staff, they've got high-ranking military people, chief of police, that sort of crowd. The chief of defense staff for Sierra Leone went to speak first, and his first words were, "Welcome back, Nova Scotia. It's great that you're here. It's wonderful that we get to celebrate our birthday and your birthday with you back home with us." The next to speak was the transport minister, with the same thing to say. "Welcome home. It's great to have Canada back here after helping us found our country." The third was the police chief, who said the same thing. Out of the corner of my eye, I can see the High Commissioner changing her speech on her iPad, and really understanding that this is a missed opportunity because I failed to educate myself about a combined history. If we choose to celebrate our similarities more than our differences, you'll find what a strong tie there is around the world. But sadly, in society, it's the differences that we get hung up on. So that's, to me, one to highlight the story of wherever you go, whatever you're going to do, especially if you're serving in uniform, please educate yourself on the history. Our history, the history of the sailor beside you, the history of everybody around you, and you'll realize that there really are that many more similarities than there are differences.
Knowledge is power, really.
It really is.
Knowledge is power. Carry on.
Yeah, I totally agree. My big thing is education. There are people that there are people racist, but other people that are not racist, they just don't know.
Right.
There's a fear of the unknown, and I could see that these days still. I hear often when they talk about Black Lives Matter, talk about Black History Month, I hear people saying, why they're shoving that down our throat. We just want to educate, My daughter, she watched the 2002 Olympics in Salt Lake City when Team Canada beat the women Team Canada beat US, and her and her friend turned around to us and they say, "We want to be hockey players. I don't want to do figure skating anymore." So buy the equipment, and she stopped figure skating. My wife was happy with that because it's so expensive, but so she goes to try out and she makes a team, Division 10, a girls' team playing against boys. So I missed the last the last session, and then the manager was asking the parents when the team was done, anybody want to coach? And nobody wanted to coach. So my wife said, well, my husband, he's not working, he's back at school, I just retired. And he said he would coach a team, I'm sure. So fast forward that evening, I get a call from the lady from the director of coaching. And she goes to me, yeah, I hear you want to coach the girls team Division 10, not 9, 8, 1, double A, triple A, 10. So then she asked me, do you own a pair of skates? Yeah, I own a pair of skates. Glove? Yeah, how old are they? Well, they're used, but can still skate. Oh, okay. Did you play any minor hockey in the Calgary? I said, no, I never played minor hockey. Did you coach before? No, I never coached before. And then she goes, did you play any minor hockey anywhere? Oh yeah, I'm from Quebec City, so I played minor hockey there until I was 16. Ah, okay. And then she goes, have you played any hockey? Yeah, I played some hockey. And then she goes, where did you play? The reason I'm in Calgary is because I met my wife here. I was based here with the national team. I played in the Olympics in '88, and then I turned pro. I played for the Canucks, New Jersey Devils, Philadelphia Flyers. Then I went to Europe for 7 years playing there, and I just retired. And so I go, hello, are you still there? So obviously, I just wanted to coach a Div 10 team, and she thought I just got off the boat. So that's what we call.
That's a very interesting story, but it's common that you would think, and I'm not sure if Patrick has experienced it, because we used to live in the same neighborhood here in Calgary. When that neighborhood first started out, I think the neighborhood would be a year old or two, and that's when we moved in there. And it's supposed to be an affluent neighborhood in Calgary. One day I was walking my dog. And I kid you not, a police officer drove slowly beside me and eventually stopped, and I stopped. And because of my background in corrections, I knew what's coming, and I knew the response I was going to give. Ma'am, good afternoon. And I looked down, I said, officer, can I help you? He was shocked initially, but then he says, because he wasn't expecting this black woman to have the courage to say, officer, can I help you? He was supposed to be talking to me, not me talking to him. He was startled and he said, somebody just called that they saw a woman walking. That is that story. Somebody called the police because they weren't expecting a black woman with a dog walking in that neighborhood. So it goes to show you the ignorance of people or assumptions. Even if I didn't live in the neighborhood or I wasn't supposed to be in that neighborhood, the fact that I had my dog with me, I wasn't going to drive from somewhere with the dog and then come and walk in the neighborhood. But again, that was the assumption and the lived experiences that we go through. From that story, you were not expected to be able to know how to play hockey or coach. I wasn't expected to live in that so-called affluent neighborhood.
True, and those look like far-fetched stories. But I tell you that there are black folks who live this on a daily basis. I try to be a little bit fashionable. I'm wearing this today because I'm celebrating Black History Month. But I dress significantly well. I'm not the best dresser, but I dress well.
Oh, I am.
I wear, I know you are. But what I'm doing with that story is that if you know fashion, you can know the shirt the guy is wearing. And you can look at the shoe they're wearing. And you can pretty much place them. I've been in the cafeteria grabbing coffee in an expensive Van Heusen suit when somebody walked up to me and asked me where they can get sugar. And I tried to say, yeah, I'm also looking for sugar. And he said, but you should know. I'm like, okay, yes, I should know, but how? Because I'm just trying to find sugar. He said, don't you work here? I said, yeah, I work here on the 32nd floor. And I worked in the Suncor building. And the 32nd floor is where you find all the executives. But I'm just telling you a story. There are many, many, many Black people. The stories that Claude and Moji told is their daily lives, right? My wife is a nurse, and I think we should retire actually. But she loves what she does, and she runs one of the homes for the elderly. So she's not a hospital nurse. She's a nurse manager in one of those homes. And she's in charge of, I might use the wrong language, I'm not in medicine, but she does the examination and determines who's fit to be admitted into the building. Because it's an independent living building, so you don't have people holding your hands.
So she does the assessment.
So she does the assessment to admit people. And one of the patients said to her, why do I have to sit here and listen to people like you? And she said, excuse me? I said, yeah, you look different. I can't even understand what you're saying. You've got this intonation. And she just went on, and the daughter was sitting there, and the daughter turned red, but couldn't do anything. But of course, my wife is trained. That's what they're trained to do. I'm not sure I could have lived through that. But I think the point is, don't listen to what we're saying like, this is Claude and hockey. The average Black Canadian goes through this on a daily basis. And the best thing that we can do for them is to engage in the conversation. Because when we engage in the conversation, we get to learn a lot. And when we learn a lot, we can become allies. And then, what can we do? We can be kind. As somebody said, kindness is the best form of love. If we're kind enough, just imagine the power. If you're a white colleague, just imagine the power you will give to a Black colleague if you notice somebody treat them poorly and you spoke up. That's the challenge for all of us.
So, on that note, we're going to go and highlight the contribution of Black people in Canadian society. But to lead us into that, we've heard we've gotten historical names and what people do. But I would like to bring us to more recent, more modern contributions. Mark Graham was born in Jamaica and grew up in Ontario. He was an Olympic 4x4 relay athlete who competed in the 1992 Olympics. He joined the Canadian Armed Forces in 2004, and he was deployed to Afghanistan in 2006. He was killed in Kandahar, Afghanistan, the same year at the age of only 33. Mark Graham is a Black Canadian hero. Oliver Bowen, a Black engineer. Most of you all live in Calgary. You know the sea train, right? I'm sure some of you you're reading on the sea train. Okay? Oliver Bowen is a Black engineer who designed and built the first leg of the sea train. Unfortunately, he died in 2000 at the age of only 50 years old. Most currently, and I'm especially proud, again, when you hear people talk about black people, and the negative connotation, I want you to remember this. Dr. Tito Daudu is a Nigerian, is a born Nigerian, only 32 years old, and she's the first black pediatric surgeon in Canada. She's only 32 years old, born in Nigeria, raised in Winnipeg. The first black, not only female, the first black, period, pediatric surgeon in Canada. And we're so fortunate she practices at the Children's Hospital here in Calgary. So I'm going to pose this to us.
Trick question.
What's that?
Trick question.
A trick question. So I'm going to pose this to you because we're almost there. See, I'm looking to, I designated you time watcher that I'm watching too. So I'm going to pose this to us. Aside from those highlights of our contribution to Canadian society, in your views, as pertaining to our traditional and corporate Canadian institutions, what steps or actions will you propose to promote fair accessibility and acceptability of black people? Patrick.
Sure, I guess you're speaking about institutional racism.
Institutional racism, whether in the corporate world or in our institution.
Right.
In our institution, we've talked about it, and there is, many institutions join the bandwagon when the topic is still hot. What are some of the actions that need to be taken for a sustained inclusivity and diversity?
Right, and I think part of the conversation started with the last question, actually. You know, every time that we've talked about, and I'm using the term institutional racism pretty widely to include almost anything you can think about that is embedded. There's also a bit of, I just put up my hand and say, anytime we want to have these conversations, we should be ready to be uncomfortable. It's okay to be uncomfortable because that's how we learn. When we go through the conversations, we become better informed. We become, like I said before, allies of those racialized communities. So, going back to institutional racism, most actions seem to be around the governance. Let's put good processes. Let's change policies. Let's rewrite laws. And those frameworks help, they really do. But it is the culture that needs to change. And the culture, you know, we all know changing culture is like swinging the Titanic. It is difficult to change culture. And so, I prescribe a few things. The first one is we all need to learn. And Black History Month is an opportunity to learn. And I'm so proud of you that even though you couldn't swing this up in February, you still chose to do it in March. I think that by itself is a statement. You could have said, February is gone, forget it, let's move on. But you said, no, we'll still do it in March. So we've got to learn, right? The second piece that we've got to do is to stand up and be counted. It's not enough to know if you do not use your knowledge to the benefit of the greater whole. And I throw into that, and I said it earlier, that's why I think it's related to the last conversation really, is the power of the majority. So when a white man or woman stands up to speak on behalf of the less privileged or the racialized, imagine the power it carries. And so most white people, I had a similar conversation with the police recruits, the Calgary police recruits, about 3 weeks ago. And they were not as many as you are. There were about 100 of them. And I could see the discomfort in the room because we spoke about the things people don't like to say in public. But I was so proud of the conversation because we had this free-flowing conversation. It's okay to be uncomfortable. Think about white privilege. And many people put up their hand and like, I'm white, I don't have any privilege. You don't know you have a privilege. There's a reason why it is called the invisible backpack. You don't know you have it at your back because you benefit without knowing it exists. So it's changing that culture for me. That's the big thing. Forget about all the laws, forget about all the processes. If we choose to do the right things, we will not be stopped by policy. I truly believe that.
It's interesting. I was part of a panel of social work department at ULC just last week. And they made the presentation and we talked, and at the end, and I said, I am so exhausted about all this meeting. And people said, why? I said, because I'm an action-oriented person. When are we going to act? Enough meetings already. When are we going to act? When are we going to see changes? And we're at a crossroad to see changes. Because what I went through, what you went through, I would like to say my children who were born here didn't go through as much because they had the color, they had the name, but not the accent. But nonetheless, they still went through it. They just didn't have the accent. But I have grandsons now. And I would like to believe that my grandsons will not go through what my children went through. But guess what? Unfortunately, I have had to intervene at a kindergarten class and educate a teacher on behalf of my grandson. And that's reality. Claude?
Yeah, I agree. I could draw from my experience in the hockey world. I'm part of the diversity and inclusion group with Hockey Alberta, and I do some work with the NHL diversity group. And then when I go to New York or I talk to the New York people, the NHL, for example, they're trying hard to do things. And like you mentioned earlier, when it's a topic of the day, everybody jumps on the bandwagon and do their things. Like I dropped a puck a couple of days ago in Vancouver on Black History Month, and, as the first Canucks to black player Canuck. But when we talk to the NHL, they want to do something, but they don't understand. That's why I come back always to education, educate people. They got the whole management of the NHL, a 40-year older man that's been there, the same group for 40 years. And we talk about the Black History Month, like we mentioned earlier, we need more than that, because I was joking with a guy, so I like to say my name is Claude, not Claude, Claude. And I said Black History Month, I'm Claude because I said it so many times. But on March 1st, all of a sudden, for 11 months, I'm Claude, So, until next February, and that shouldn't be like that, It should be like constant education, and even for ourselves, we got different minorities from different countries, the Middle East and stuff like that. And I know people are afraid because afraid of the unknown. So everybody has to educate so we can live together as one big family.
As a people.
As people.
So from a military perspective, military people in the room, we're undergoing a cultural change that I think came too late. And as you mentioned, legislating policy is easy, and that's our first step. So if you serve in uniform, you're well aware of every policy around. Everything is governed by a policy, whether it's a QRNO, a NAB, or something. We write everything down, and we say this is how things have to be. We struggled with writing down this is how we treat one another, and we've started doing that. We now have the hateful conduct policies. What to report, see something, say something, take action. And we started the change that way, because that's what we're familiar with. That can happen quickly. The real task is changing hearts and minds, and you can't legislate that. And that moves at a glacial pace. Education, again, is the key. So we had, as part of the cultural change, a lot of town halls where commanding officers were asked to talk. But in some cases, it was purely academic experience. Here's the hateful conduct policy. Here's what you have to do, right? Show of hands, anybody heard that speech delivered that way? Here's what you have to do. Here's our report. Here's the form you fill out. Carry on. We tried to open up discussion. So I was commandant at the fleet school at the time, and the school had about 1,000 people, and so we had to break it up into 3 different sessions. The Q&A came, and as you mentioned, very uncomfortable, right? And the way that it was delivered, it was about an hour of videos, conversations, and discussion on policy. So it got more and more uncomfortable. So the first question gets asked, and that kind of opens up the door for more and more people. 3 distinct groups that I delivered the speech to, 3 distinct responses. The first group took it as I got to be here, so I might as well listen to it. You know, is this almost done? Can I get back to work? The second group was a lot more engaged, had a lot of questions, spoke well to the policy and the lived experiences in the video. The third group was the one I was fearing. It was a group of people, and I won't mention trades at all. We opened up with a land acknowledgement, and we opened up for questions about an hour and 40 minutes later. One gentleman stood right up and said, "Why do we still do that land acknowledgement?" And he had been simmering for an hour and 45 minutes, waiting to ask the question. We explained why it's done and you know, respect for other cultures. His next question is, "Why am I sitting here for an hour and a half and made to feel guilty?" I said, "Well, I don't think that was the intention. If you feel guilty." "Well, I've just been called a racist for the last hour and a half." I said, "I don't think anybody called you a racist. We're trying to explain the policy." And he said, "You know, and what's this white privilege you keep talking about? You know, I've had to work just as hard as everybody else." The base commander was there. He was a senior person. He took the question and very, you know, properly just said, you know, this is what this is. This is the town hall. Here's what we're trying to achieve. I had to grab the microphone and kind of unpack. I couldn't sort of take it. We need to unpack why you're asking these questions and what's going on. To the point about white privilege, you're right. I love that analogy of the invisible backpack. That it's something that's just there. Nobody's being blamed for it. It's just something that's there, and there needs to be an acknowledgement. Any baseball fans in the room who love baseball? It was explained to me that white privilege is being born on third base but thinking you hit a triple. All right? That's white privilege. There are things that you don't notice in society with people of color that you don't see because, like everybody else, we react when something affects us. And if it doesn't affect you, then it's not a thing. So that's what we struggle with. And education pieces and panels and discussions like this hopefully open eyes to there are other things that are going on. When I was commandant at the fleet school, the building has been there for years. It's one of the oldest buildings, the headquarters there. And as you walk down the main hall, like many military buildings, you'll see all the former commanding officers, all the pictures of all the former commanding officers, and in this case, all the school coxswains are in a line. And of course, it's all white male. And I asked one of the guys there, you know, how many female commandants or coxswains have we had? And he's like, "I don't know, I don't think any." I said, "Well, you look at the board out there, and what do you see?" He said, "I don't know, I've never really noticed." And I said, "I bet you I can ask any female member of this team, and they will tell you exactly how many women are on that board." And I did, and they knew. You have to see it to be it. You see yourself reflected somewhere. And, you know, sadly, with our institution, we're not there yet. We're still a stern of station in regards to where society is. So the amount of work that has to be done in society at large is amplified with the military. We're just a bit farther behind. So while we're taking the right steps, I think we need to do more at the education piece, more events like this, more getting to know, you know, your shipmates, other people in your unit, and understanding their stories so that it does affect you. You might feel uncomfortable, and that's fine. If you feel uncomfortable about it, that's fine, because you'll get over that uncomfortable space once you get to know what their lived experiences are.
Well, also too, if you know their stories and you're familiar with your surroundings and the people you're working with, it also gives you a sense of peace too, because now you know, and when you are aware, you know what to look for. I will tell you a quick story and we're going to wrap up because it's already time, right? My daughter, one of my daughters, is a costume designer for films and television shows. And they do a lot of shopping in antique stores, in malls and whatever. And when she goes with her assistant to do returns at the end of show, when it wraps, there are some things that they return if they are not used, they're in good conditions. Her ID will be checked over and over, and receipts will be checked over and over. But her assistant, she's the boss, but her assistant, nothing, no question will be asked. And it went on a few times, and the assistant was looking at my daughter to straighten those people up. But she didn't. The assistant finally asked, I saw how those people were treating you, how come you didn't say anything? And she looked at her assistant and she said, that is the life that we live every day. And it's not up to me to straighten them up. You were there, you knew what's going on, why didn't you say something? And that's where we want to give it to you. Thank you very much, Paul, Claude, and Patrick. So, it is time for Q, question and answer. I hope you have lots of questions for us.
And it's okay to ask.
And it's okay to ask.
I think Paul was being too generous to other organizations. Many organizations out there are worse than the military, trust me. But I think the military, the institution that you have, is put on a pedestal. And so it shines through. But I've worked in organizations where the struggle against unconscious bias is just as huge.
Questions?
First one's always the hardest.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or maybe they don't want to, okay, good. They don't want to come up. That's good, it's okay too.
So my question is how to deal with systemic racism, especially I'm a part of the Tecumseh team as well, but I also work in childcare. And I have had a lot of parents that are racist towards me because I am the director at that center. One, I might be too young, and two, I'm Black. So they don't direct questions to me, they don't talk to me or anything, they look for my assistant, or even like someone who's no longer the assistant director anymore to talk to because that person is either older or Caucasian. My question is how to deal with that.
Who wants to take that?
I can try. I think it's a difficult question, so I'm going to be looking to my colleagues here to pipe in. I kind of feel sorry, I have to put that, because you're in that intersection of many things. You're female, you're Black, you're young, you've got everything, coming against you. And we talk about the intersection of biases as we train and develop people in this space. Oftentimes, you hope that your skills will speak for you. So, I don't know your industry very well. There's always that initial bias that you get.
I'll supplement when you're done.
That's right. So your competencies kind of speak for you over time, and hopefully you get to some better place. But the most powerful thing you can do, and I think Paul kind of hinted at it, is just a bit of education. And I know you're young, and I know it might be challenging to speak up to authority, but just a little correction, just a little show of competency. You know, I can actually help with that. I've got this qualification that allows me to deal with that. Again, people talk over people when exactly they try to treat people that way. They behave as if it do not exist in the room. And what you need to do is to time out sometimes. You just say time out, you know, excuse me, I'm the one that was employed to do that, and here's why I was employed. I can really help with that if you allow me. Most people will be shocked into allowing you. Others would defer just because they know where you're going with that conversation. But unfortunately, it's a tough conversation to have.
And they want to frustrate you, right? And if you get frustrated, then they've achieved their goal. So you really, 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 and I'm speaking from somebody who actually worked in a jail, and people will come in and will bypass and talk to other people until those people said, my boss is the person you just passed. But don't let it get to you as far as losing your frustration or your concentration. Be as calm as you can be and just deliver, like Patrick said. I can help you with that. I am in charge of that, and I can help you with it. And that is you owning your own without being frustrated or them having the best of you, because they also want you to be upset. So you just say, I'm in charge of that, and I can help you. Yeah?
Thank you very much. Sorry.
Okay, so I have a question that someone slipped into my hands anonymously, and it's along the lines of what our friend has already asked. So the question is, what are some of the challenges faced by sailors of African descent, specific to the military, in recent times that are systemic in nature, and what can today's leadership begin to do to address this?
Why do I feel like that's a question for me?
It's for you. It's definitely for you.
Hey, I go to war too every time I play.
There you go. There you go. What was the first part of the question? It was some of the issues faced by...
Yeah, some of the issues faced by sailors of African descent. That's specific to the Navy.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if we're talking about onboard ships, so my career, I started sailing in 1993. My first ship was HMCS TECUMSEH. It doesn't exist anymore. And it was a trip over to Europe. I had been to sea before. It was sort of back in the battle days of the Navy, so all-male ship, a lot of drinking, a lot of the things that we managed to get away from. So it was fantastic. As the only black sailor on board the ship, in a ship of, I think, 238, you can imagine sort of what was faced. And it wasn't a sort of a coordinated effort of, you know, we have a black sailor on board, this is what's going on. That's just how people thought and were at the time. So being excluded from certain things, but for a variety of reasons, you know, being black, being junior, and in some cases being an NCIO, which back then was get in the ops room and be quiet. So what's rewarding for me to see now is that some of the things that I faced back then no longer exist. And I think that's more owing to a generational shift. There's still some prejudices out there, but the opportunities are still there if you want to avail yourself of them. Promotions have always been a thing, getting some better jobs. I think we're taking some steps to change that. The PR process is moving away from right now moving away from gender, and there's a move afoot to remove last names on the PER. So it's just a service number, a rank, and a trade. And that way you don't know who they're talking about. Somebody had mentioned that changing the pronouns was enough to make it so that we're not sure, but you know, you see Smith on there and it might be fine. You see Muhammad on there, and then an unconscious bias kicks in. And for a lot of these senior people, you know, there's a second look that gets taken. That still exists a bit. I love coming to the NRDs, and I love looking at the state of the Navy now, not just the reserves, and seeing the diversity that wasn't there in '93 at all. So it's not really looking at where we are now, but looking at who's coming up behind. And I can see the landscape changing, and it's incredibly rewarding. I go back to my piece about hearts and minds. We can legislate all these changes and do whatever we can, but it'll take some time until, you know, there's another Black SEAL, or there's the first Black Admiral, or the first Black Fleet Commander, for other people to see, hey, I can accomplish that, I can achieve that, and for really true change to start happening. I hope that answers the question. Yeah. Very well.
Thank you very much.
Here, I have a question for Claude. Being from Quebec City, you would know a hockey player called Tony McKigney.
Yeah.
And the reason why I ask this is because a friend of mine, his name is Dave McKigney, his stepbrother, who used to play hockey with my dad because he was a reservist at the time in the military. And I just wanted to know, as Tony was one of Gretzky's, also helped him as a kid, if you had any influences from Tony McKigney as well.
If I had influences from who?
Tony McKigney.
Oh, yeah, I had a chance to play some charity hockey games with Tony. Later in my life, I realized there were other people of color playing, and that was exciting for me. Like I mentioned earlier, we're looking for somebody that looked like you, and Tony played for several teams, and he did very well in his career, and that was an honor for me to play with him in that charity event. My dad always told me, you know, we kind of touched on that a little bit. If you want to do this career, you got to make sure you be good, because as soon as you make a mistake or you go out, you do something, it'll backfire on you. It always did. I'm part of an era from Willie O'Ree to Piquet Souban, an era of players that we just look the other way. The only Black player on the team. Every time I got to a new team, I almost have announced myself as a good guy, not a yo what's up guy, because you know what I mean. So there's all kind of. You talk about Tony McKigney. There was a guy like Fletcher. He was a tough guy. I remember going to got traded to a team and a farm team in Utica, New York, and that team wasn't very good. And when I got there, we won 15 games in a row. I was kind of the star, and then I do commercial and stuff like that, and fan chanted my name in the stands. So that player comes in. He was a tough guy, and the fans were all over him. N-word, monkey sound. My teammate called him nigger and stuff like that. And I go to my teammate, hey, I'm standing beside you. Oh no, Claude, you're not like them. You're like us. He's a Negro, and you're just one of us. And I said, what does that mean? And if it's a French guy, oh, he's a frog. You're like us. What do you mean I'm like you? Just because I play on the same team? But that's what we get all the time. So. But like I said, my first idol was a white guy, Guy Lafleur, and then I started seeing guys like Tony McKigney, like as you mentioned. That's why, you know. So somebody asked me, you know, we talked about shoving this in our throat. People are telling all the time, but when I do this, it's not for me per se. It's for the next generation of kids. You don't know how many times I got parents calling me and they said, well, the parents in the penalty box called my son N-word. And I coached one girl on my team, she's half, and then we were playing in Viking and then Alberta, and then a couple of the boys called her the N-word, and she was shocked. So I don't want, I went through that in my life. I don't want the next generation to go through that. And it's not fair. And when they play hockey, they want just to play like any other person. I had my toque on, and I skated to the rink and played with my friends. I was black, they were white. It doesn't matter to me, but it matters for other people, and that's what needs to be changed.
And as you said, sometimes the kids are not the problem. It's the adults around them, and they emulate what they see from the adults. So, is that it, or can we take one more?
I think we're on time, ma'am. So
Yeah. There is somebody here.
there's someone there.
Yeah, right here.
Okay, just the one.
You see, we invited them to ask questions, so we can't really shut it down like that.
Thank you, ma'am. Sublevin and Dongan here in Tecumseh. One of my best friends actually one of my best friends is black, but he's a mixed family, and he has 2 girls. And I'm kind of wondering from your perspective, kind of what racism that they face in a mixed environment, because I've heard that they don't really feel like they fit in either environment. I'd like to kind of get the panel's perspective on that.
So both my kids are biracial, and
Well, that's perfect. You are here to answer that.
Mine too.
Yeah, you too. Okay.
So we'll see if there's some similarities here in the upbringing. When they were younger, they struggled, and I mean elementary age, trying to fit in. And in Halifax, there's enough light-skinned kids that they actually formed their own group in elementary. It was the light-skinned kids all hung together. And some of the difficulties is choosing which side you're going to identify with. And not that you should have to choose, but the struggle with that. And then came to the realization that in society, even if you're biracial, you're black. Right? So that's where it went to. If one of your parents is black, you're black. And that's how he was sort of looked at, treated, viewed, and he came to the understanding that, okay, that's where society put me. That's the side of the family I'm going to be sort of more associated with. So it's interesting, when my eldest son was applying for a scholarship, they asked him to identify, and he refused to identify. He said, I'm very that generation. I'm not going to identify. They can't put me in a box, Dad. They can't, whatever. And I said, well, yes, they can, because if you check that box, you get an extra $5,000 from school. If you don't check that box, Mom and I will come up with the money. But what is the struggle with identifying and trying to figure out? And he said, if I identify, then everybody's going to expect me to act a certain way. And I said, why? And he had it in his head that black acts a certain way, white acts a certain way. So if I take this box, I'm not going to be able to, at the time, I'm not going to be able to have, and this is his words, Avril Lavigne in my playlist. I like listening to what she has, but so there was that pressure. There's that pressure on to be able to have to figure out, how am I going to relate? And being a teenager is tough enough. Being a kid's tough enough. Dealing with everything else, to have this part of your identity in question as well is really difficult.
Yeah, well, my kids had a little identity crisis. My youngest one, I think she was in grade 1 or 2. She didn't want me to pick her up at school anymore, so I didn't know why. And I guess one kid called her, hey, you got a brown face. And she's not very dark. She could be either race. And she had to deal with that. And she didn't want me to come to the ring, to the school, because big black men come in. So more like a Scottish white mom. But yeah, so that's what they had to go through, and then that happened.
Well, I think we are going to stop. I didn't want to stop. This is just getting going, but I'm getting signal. So thank you so very much for your attentiveness and for your questions, for your attendance. And I would like to especially thank the panelists. It's been a really nice conversation, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I'm a chatterbox, so if it's left to me, we'll be here till midnight, but we can't. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Really
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you,
If
sir.
you want to take a look at my book, it's over there, and if you want a copy, you can buy one.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much. We really appreciate your time. Okay.